Well, hello, Underdog Leadership Podcast listeners. Have I got a treat for you? Have I got a woman to introduce you to? She's been somebody I have watched from the sidelines for a long time. And maybe on the podcast, you'll get to hear my first introduction to a woman named Tammy Zonker. But I wanted to read to you, before you get a chance to meet the woman in person, her mission and vision statements from her website. She is the CEO and founder of Fundraising Transformed. We're going to talk more about that word transformed. And she says, we help nonprofits drive intentional change by transforming their fundraising so they can transform the world. And this vision she has is a world in which every basic and human need to survive and thrive is fulfilled. There is something so beautiful and so simple about that. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with Tammy Zonker. And one other thought I would bring to you before I invite her onto the microphone is this concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. And I just feel like that's so important as we, explore this idea of underdog leadership and coming together and lifting everyone up. I think all of us that are underdog leaders really can resonate with that. And so without further ado, welcome Tammy to the podcast.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm so excited to talk with you and your listeners this morning.
Yeah, wonderful. So I challenged Tammy. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to tell her a little bit of a story before. I challenged Tammy to tell a story to kick us off, and we both joked about how we have stories about donors, Tammy. We have stories about gifts, and the invitation was to tell a story about yourself and how that felt good, but also not our standard MO, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it took me a second. Jenny's like, take a minute. And I thought, for today, I'm just going to be me, completely authentic, very candid. And Jenny, I am your underdog. I truly am. So I grew up in rural Indiana. I lovingly refer to it as little trailer on the prairie.
My goodness.
Right? So, my parents, my father was a welder. He was a mechanic. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. There were 4 of us. And, we had some challenges, both economic challenges, but there were also issues around alcoholism and some, unpleasantries that resulted, like that are the ripple effect of that. And, but I think that even sad things that happen in our lives sometimes happen for a reason, to give you purpose, to drive you. And for me, that was definitely the case. So there's a quote that I love that I want to share with you. And that is that no one can go back and make a brand new start, but anyone can start now and make a brand new ending. And that is like the theme of my life.
Oh my. Then where do you fit in those 4 kids?
I am the 3rd child, the only daughter. Yes.
Wow.
We could unpack that on another episode.
That's amazing. So I have to ask. So here you are in rural Indiana. What's your first gig? Like, how do you fall into this one? I know we're not supposed to say we fall. We were supposed to say we choose this thing, but tell me that story.
Yeah. So it was very clear to me, through books. I mean, I feel like books were my saving grace, and I had my own heroes and mentors like, Joe from Little Women, Anne Frank, like these amazing girls and women who took unimaginable circumstances and turned it into, with intention, like really created transformation. And so education was clearly the way out. Okay. And so I did all the things we're supposed to do, check all the boxes. I was really fortunate to get some scholarships and some grants. And I took a job. I worked my way into consultative sales in the IBM dealer network. So I know. And so I'm like actually managing a practice in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And managed some national accounts, was doing really well. And my employer put their practice directors through Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the week-long class. And on the Friday morning, the last day of class, there's an exercise where you visualize your 80th birthday. So who's in the room? What are they acknowledging you for? Like, really, essentially, it's the legacy question. And I realized in that moment that other than my family and my faith, what I loved the most about my life was my volunteer work with nonprofit organizations. It was like a light bulb moment. Wow. So I went back to the Indiana University, School of Philanthropy, the fundraising school, like on the side, taking vacation days and all of that, and got my certification in fundraising management, and then went out to find either a development director job or maybe even a CEO of a small nonprofit. And Jenny, inevitably, I would always make it to like the final round of interviews. Yep. And there would be board members there, and they would say, let me get this straight. You do this and make that. And you're willing to do this and make this? Why don't you just join our board? Wow. Right? I mean, that's the beginning of that scarcity mindset. Like we would, of course, not give up money for purpose. No. So I found...
Can I just interrupt?
Please.
Look at how they're choosing for you. They're making assumptions. You know how we say don't do your donors accounting? They're making all sorts of assumptions about you, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Like they would rather... It's like the penny wise, pound foolish. They would rather have me on the board and being a supporter, a donor, than to have me generating revenue inside the organization and creating sustainability across multiple donors, right? So give me a fish versus teach me to fish. It's interesting.
So who gave you that first chance?
A desperate little Girl Scout council. The position had been open for months and months. And they said, okay, let's give it a try. And so we did. And so at that point in time, 70% of the revenue came from the cookie sale. So we had to flip that, and it eventually set the stage for a $6 million capital campaign. It was just really an extraordinary organization doing amazing work to help, equip and empower girls and young women to become the leaders that they were born to be.
So I just love the fact that the organization that gave you a chance was a girls and women's organization. There's just some beautiful, I've got goosebumps on that one, Tammy. Yeah. If you were to go back with a magic wand or a sage, be a sage for that young Tammy, those first 5 years, I think that my audience for Underdog Leadership, they've been around the block. They've seen it all. But I always love those words of wisdom. What would you say to yourself back then?
Fear not. Fear not. Fear not. And, I think that fear is a powerful motivator if channeled, like if you don't let it grip you, but you turn it into fuel and turn it into possibility. Yeah. And so now I think back, we just did earlier this summer in August, we were invited to do to Australia to do 5 one-day major gift masterclasses in 5 capital cities. So that was extraordinary. I've spoken in Dublin, Ireland. I've been to the IFC and spoken at their conference just outside of Amsterdam on a panel. And I just think, kind of good job, little Tammy.
Good job, little Tammy from Indiana.
Good job. What's next?
Pat on the back.
Yeah. And just to acknowledge all of the people that poured into me, that believed in me, that encouraged me, that helped course correct me, who were willing to have courageous conversations with me when I was thinking too small.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And just not being courageous enough. So, it's never a single person's journey.
Yes, it's not. It's, that old proverb is so cheesy, but, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And anybody who's managing rogue volunteers, herding cats, or anybody who needs to hear that, who's in a leadership position, who's trying to get a bunch of senior directors to focus on the thing they want to focus on instead of everybody else, there's a kernel of knowledge there. So we haven't introduced our title yet on purpose, because I just wanted people to get to know you. But Tam and I went back and forth, and it's the most gorgeous title. The title of this podcast is The Lost Art of Listening. And so why was that title so important to you, Tammy?
Oh, I think that listening and having other people feel seen, heard, and valued is at the core of all success, of all relationships, whether it's our personal relationships, our donors, our customers, our direct reports, our upper management. It's the essence, one of the most important ingredients in relationship building. Mm-hmm. And we've lost it. We've lost it.
So did we lose it to cell phones and dings and technology? Did we lose it to time? What did we lose it to?
Yeah, I think you're right. We've definitely lost it to distractions. We lost it to, smartphones. Please don't get me started.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if there's even a moment's pause, we jump on, check email, social. So we lost it to distractions like technology.
Yeah.
We lost it to the myth that we can, the way to get more done is to multitask.
Yeah.
We lose it to assumptions.
That.
Yeah. And the research shows that those that we are the closest to, we are the worst at making assumptions. So, even with your partner, your spouse, when you say, oh, it's so romantic somehow, we can finish each other's sentences. Stop that. It means you're not listening to them and creating the space. Yeah. We lose it to, there's two, the research shows there's two other ways that we lose it. We listen to respond.
Guilty. Just owning it.
Yeah, we all do it. But the key is recognizing it. Yeah. And then pausing that brain that's saying, okay, I'm building my response to just really fully be present. And then the other thing that we've lost it to, research shows, is something called competitive listening. Which I had never heard of until I really began digging into this topic. So competitive listening is when you say, oh, I just went on vacation to Myrtle Beach and it was beautiful. Every day was amazing. And we went to this and we did that. And I'm like, oh, that's so amazing, Jenny. We went on vacation too. Let me tell you about my vacation. AKA my vacation was better than your vacation.
Yeah.
Right? Even if that's not my intention. And we do it because we want to relate. Mm-hmm. We want to share. Mm-hmm. But it actually shuts down your experience. I'm not listening to you. I'm competing with you in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, the analogy on that one is a flashlight. Sometimes when I talk about major gift conversations or difficult, courageous conversations, this flashlight, that we have this power to turn the flashlight on someone and to glow with them. And you can't flip the flashlight back. Competitive, I can totally relate to that. Totally. But in fact, almost maybe too much, in the sense of, I think, when I think about number twos to number ones, or just, I'm stereotyping here, but women, or feeling to get your voice into the conversation, there are some specific tools that I like to talk about. One is, when you're in a boardroom or you're in a senior leadership discussion and you get cut off, something gets interrupted or whatever. So there's two parts. One is the observer part, when someone else gets cut off, having the power to go, sorry, Susan, I just wanted to hear the end of your thought, right? After it's gone around, not interrupting the person that interrupted, but I'd love to finish that. Or on the same front, women tend to back away or are just why bother when I'm being talked over, just to be perfectly blunt. So one of the techniques I've been adding into my toolkit is thanks so much. I'm not quite done yet. Can I finish my thought?
Yes.
Classy. And I say this with, this whole idea of, it's funny you brought up the word competition, because space and air is competition. And I think that we have to find a way to get our opinions across, but in a way that's authentic. I know that word really, I'm not the kind of person that's just going to keep talking over you, Tammy. I'm not.
Yeah, just louder.
No. So, and then go into more. So I love talking about meaningful conversations, because the next thing any listener here is going to say is, I get you, Tammy. I'm supposed to listen. How do I help people go there? How do I help people get to the juicy stuff? Like whether you're talking about, a very difficult HR situation, or you're talking with a donor and you're trying to bring them around to the topics you want to talk about. How do you build? I've talked about those transitions, right? From intro to meet. How do you do it?
Yes.
Ideas.
So definitely this is where getting to the juicy stuff is where the role or the tool of curiosity comes into play, and empathy, like listening with an open mind and asking those open-ended questions. And I have, there's the handful of phrases that you just have in your back pocket, like, say more about that. That's so interesting. Or, I'm not sure I'm clear. Can you give me an example? Those are, I think, those questions, that curiosity, and that get you to the meat, that open those conversations up and really have them get to the meaning, those meaningful conversations. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Jenny, I have learned so much from my 4-year-old grandson, Hudson. Why, Nanas? Right? Like, so just, he will drill down. Now, I'm not going to say why 17 times. Yeah. It's so totally charming from him. It would be really annoying from me.
Yeah.
But the research says if you can ask why in some form or fashion, maybe not that exact word, those exact words, 3 times, you will open something up. You'll get to that next level of understanding.
That seemed 3 times. How often do we get close and not go that 3rd time? Or, to me, what's coming up is 3 different ways of saying it, right? It's a bit like when I was teaching piano way back when. I'd try it this way. Oh, didn't work. Try it this way. Oh, the 3rd time's a charm. Found a different entry point.
Yes.
And it's a dance. What's your thought on, so I'm an open book most of the time, and I tend to share a lot in these conversations. So I'd be curious your thoughts on where the line is with donors and personal and connection. My technique, I call it, is, because I like to name them, not to make them gross or sleazy, but to be able to bring them back and to remind myself of them. But I use yourself as an example. I will often share something from my experiences as a trampoline. I think we have to be vulnerable ourselves first. That's a principle of mine, if that was one of my core values. If I'm going to invite someone to talk about something incredibly personal, like a cancer journey, or incredibly personal, like the loss of someone in their family, I feel like I need to be vulnerable first. What's your take on that? Because I've heard different things from different people about how much you share.
Yeah. So I think the answer to that question is specific to your relationship with that person, right? If it's a first meeting, I may not pour my heart out, but I will definitely open up and kind of set the tone for the candor and the authenticity in that relationship. Maybe in the next meeting, or maybe I won't share in a group of 6 in a really deeply personal level.
Yeah.
But when it's one-on-one, or I'm meeting with a donor couple, then there could be room to go to that next level. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel like we set the bar for how authentic, for how transparent, for the permission, like the courage we show and the permission we give in that demonstration. And the other thing I just want to emphasize too, that I think it would be a real gift if we could all embrace this. Get comfortable with long pauses. The best stuff comes in the space of silence.
I'm just going to take a minute here.
A long pause.
A long pause. You know, it's funny. It brings me back to my executive coaching training. And that is so true. First of all, I mean, I just want to acknowledge all the Speedy Gonzalez executive directors and CEOs out there. They're like, time is money, boom, 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 right? It's like the antithesis. It's like the unlearning. And when I was in the coaching program, you know, we would practice, same thing. They would describe to me, this is interesting. You can tell when someone's thinking when they look up to the right. And I don't know if you've had that happen in your conversations, but that's where the good stuff is. They're processing and they're trying to figure out how to respond. And we do not want to interrupt that. But I can distinctly remember when I was having mentor coachings and, you know, people would watch your coaching. Talk about stressful. Because then you're like Jenny Mitchell, the performer, just wants to fill every single freaking minute of the session. And to actually believe that the work is, we used to say that work is done by the coachee. So the coach doesn't do any of the work, right? When you are doing the work and manhandling the conversation, that's you doing your thing. You're putting yourself on the coaching experience. But those pauses are actually the moments to process. Those pauses are the moments to distill. And, you know, I've gotten into a habit sometimes of counting to 1, 2, 3. I've gotten into the habit of grabbing a glass of water. Sometimes I'll just inhale and exhale. But that's learned. I just want to say to the audience that's listening, it is learned, and it's a thing, Tammy.
It is a thing, for sure. You know, especially if we're talking about hot topics like money, right? Or an issue around conflict.
Yeah.
And just visualize, like we've all sat at those leadership tables and everyone is jumping in and cutting each other off and talking over each other. And so how do you take a moment of silence, a pause in that space? And so I think it is a dance, like you mentioned earlier, like, I want to complete this thought, or I want to hear that thought, right? How you can be the observer. Mm-hmm. And so to masterfully string together all these tools that we've been talking about, that we're discussing right now, like to put out there and like pause in the middle of a sentence, but like have your finger up, like, so that people know, like, I'm not done. I'm not even close to being done.
Yes.
That there's, so it goes back to listening and the nonverbal communication, right? So like I'm leaning in, my hand is up. I might be looking up to the left, nope, to the right. And so those are also communication tools, our physicalness.
Yes.
Right? And that space is a communication tool.
Yes.
Both to listen and observe, to have people like go that next level, share that next thought because there's space to do it. But also that pause can be a tool that we use when we're communicating so that we can't, our full thoughts and the feelings behind it can be heard.
I'm seeing it kind of like an arc. It's a bit of an arc. Like imagine, it's coming up as like, imagine if every time, not every time, but many times when we spoke, we had the privilege and the space to begin, say our thought and close it each time, rather than this sort of bumblebee, or maybe that's not the right word, waspy kind of jump in. How much different the energy would be in the room. So another thing I talk a lot about is that we are responsible for our energy. So our teams run around going, oh my God, I'm so busy. I'm so crazy busy. There's so much going on. You know, that energy gets picked up and gets fulfilled through the prophecy of what you're creating. And if you've ever watched Tammy speak, for those of you listening, there is something charismatic, kinetic, the pacing of your language, it draws people in. So maybe that's one of the takeaways for today too, is like own your space, own the pacing. And I can talk really fast and I can talk about all sorts of things and you're going to get really excited, and that's great too, because I can be a butterfly and a kangaroo and all those great things. But what will you actually remember after I leave?
Yeah. Own it, be accountable.
There's some research, I'm not going to have it right, but women are damned if they do and damned if they don't. the idea that if we talk too much, we're sort of chatty Cathys, and if we don't talk enough, we're perceived as weak. So we're kind of screwed. And this is all based on perception. I don't want to say this is fact or truth. It's just the way we're perceived. And I think we have a real challenge against the sort of societal norms, which are based on a male energy kind of an approach. I'm not saying good or bad. We think we need both. And I have certainly found that finding my pace, finding my balance, especially when I'm leading the meeting, and especially like in a lot of our stories, we have these crazy power imbalances that we're only just starting to talk about, whether it's the imbalance of somebody who's your boss, the imbalance of somebody who pays for half of your programming as a huge major donor.
Yes.
The balance of age, that's another one. We have gender, we have all of our LGBTQ, we have all of our BIPOC. I mean, you could throw your hands up and say, I give up. But I think the first step, I'd be interested to see your thoughts on this, is about power and about the acknowledgement of the power in the room as I think that's the first step. Calling a spade a spade. Any advice, techniques? That could be a whole other podcast, Tammy.
It could. It definitely could. I mean, first of all, we don't want to be that, stereotyped as that chatty Cathy. And so that's why when we speak, we need to be clear, very clear, to the point, make our case, make that statement, not minimizing our point of view. Like, I could be totally wrong here, but
that.
Or that, have you heard this new thing that it's where people say, women say, I've never heard a man say this, where I hear women say, they make their statement and they say, does that make sense?
Oh, shoot me now.
That's a thing.
You know what I mean? That's mine. You know what I mean?
So when I'm going to have a conversation, whether it's at that leadership table or even with a direct report or a donor, I know it's a sticky topic. I will say, I would like to have a courageous conversation here, right? So set the context. Like, it's a nod to the power dynamic. It's a nod to, this is a hot topic, even if it's a peer-to-peer conversation. So I say, just set the tone. And Patrick Lencioni, in his wonderful work around the 5 dysfunctions of a team, he talks about, the very base. Like, if you don't have trust, you can't have, the first dysfunction is lack of trust. And without trust, you can't build to the next level of that pyramid, which is engaging in conflict.
If you're looking at me, I'm got my dukes up. Fight it out.
Exactly. And the way he distinguishes conflict is, it's not personal. Yeah. It's not, it goes back to constructive conflict.
Yeah.
Let's look at the issue. Because if you can't have those conversations, you have an artificial level of trust.
You're tiptoeing.
Exactly. Walking on eggshells. And how do you change the world that way?
So true. Just to different language, the same thing, because I love the way that you kind of set that up, Tammy. We're discussing the issue, not the person. So we're not attacking the person. So Bob, who has the annual fund, or Bob, who runs the XYZ team, it's not him. It's the portfolio.
Yes.
And I think the other part is the pursuit of excellence. I don't know anybody in any job who doesn't want to be good at what they do. And so I think also couching it through, in the pursuit of a high-performing team, or in the pursuit of excellence, I bring this courageous conversation to you. Take it as you will. I'm open to where we go. But all too often, is that we avoid or deflect or pretend it's not bothering us, something that's going on. And all that happens, and this is my 50 years of experience on the planet, is the thing blows up. It's 10 times worse than it could have been if we had addressed it directly and in a compassionate way. I really believe that ambition and compassion can coexist. We've been told that it can't, that you have to be tough, to be in charge. And I just say balderdash. I just say, I could have said something else, but I'm going to say balderdash because leadership actually starts with compassion, but compassion doesn't mean you do what everybody else says. Compassion doesn't mean you don't make tough decisions, and we don't end up, empathy is when we get caught up in the other side, but you can have compassion and I think still lead with confidence and kindness. All of this tied into the idea of listening, because you cannot be compassionate unless you're actually listening to the other person's point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the conversation where I could easily jump to, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Where the more compassionate, the more open-minded, the fewer assumptions I'm making would be, help me understand.
Help me understand.
Help me understand. And maybe even acknowledgement, like, I know that you are, expert, you're this, you that, you just, so help me understand what happened here. Help me understand the thought, because I really want to know. It could be like, maybe I have some blinders on, because I think I would have handled it a different way. So help me understand. Let's just talk it out. Right?
It feels very safe when you say it that way.
Yeah.
There's also that in those conflict situations, there's easily, and maybe I'm just an underdog and I see things this way. Like I have to always catch myself too. Which lens am I looking through? But when there's a power dynamic, we immediately defend our position. We defend and we deflect and we push back. But when the power dynamic with help me understand puts you on a level playing field, to use your language, lift all the boats. If we're in this together, Brene Brown has this wonderful visual that I think about, that when you give and receive feedback, you must be able to sit on the same side of the table. The minute you're on the other side of the table, this actually goes for physical things. When I go into meetings, I try really hard not to be across a table from someone, even if it's a matter of me turning my body. These are tiny little things that energetically I notice in a room. And I'm so glad you're nodding, because I thought I was the only crazy in the room. Like that energy of the corporate tends to do it, right? The chair way over on the other side versus going to sit at this intimate table. It's funny, we've morphed from listening, which we think of as language. But what we're really bringing in here is listening with our whole bodies.
Jerry Panis, who of course was a legendary fundraiser, extraordinary business leader, he had a quote. He would say, listen with your entire being, listen with your eyes, listen as if you are hard of hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what you're describing, Jenny, it's the positioning, it's the eye contact, it's the nodding, it's your posture, how your arms, like what kind of space you're in, and how it's all of that. It's what's said. It's what's not said. It's definitely tone. I mean, I could say, help me understand, which is...
That's so true. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right? Throwing my arms up in the air. Help me understand this one. Totally different. So we have to be responsible and just accountable, to your point, for our emotional weight, the energy we bring to the room and to the conversation.
Yeah. So interesting.
And it's hard, because here's what we do. We're scheduled back to back to back to back to back. One meeting ended late, so we're coming to this meeting early in a frenzy. Like, when do you actually pause and be intentional and even visualize who you are going to be in this room, how you are going to bring forth the issues that move the organization forward, even when those are hot topics? How do you engage in constructive conflict, right? So it goes back to making space, being self-aware, being accountable.
And that word intention too, intentional, that's even in your intro, right? Meetings have a residue to them as well. I just want to highlight that you come out of a tough meeting or something and there's a residue in the air, and to think you can just hop into the next one is just naive. I just want to say that. And so I don't know how that lands for you listening today, whether it's you need to, as the leader, acknowledge that, the residue from the previous meeting, like to your point, Tammy, call a spade, whether it's that we take 5 minutes and we just sit for a second, regroup, and that is not go on your email or text or follow up or what, that's literally just recalibrating is one of my things, so that we can be actively listening to the next meeting.
Yeah. And I'll just say, a lot of these lessons I learned the hard way, right? Mistakes, like blow into a meeting, drop a bomb, I'm fine, leave. And everyone else is like picking up their emotional pieces.
Yeah.
I
appreciate that. Yeah. So in our final thoughts, I feel like we could go, this has been such a great conversation. The wisdom, and just the sharing of what's coming up for me is, if there's things that you've picked up on from listening to this call, or, we all get there, to your point, Tammy, we all get there, we all learn, but I'm passionate about moving the dial faster, and just sort of passing on some ideas or some wisdom through this podcast to help you thrive in meaningful conversations. So 2 questions. The second last question is, I'd love for you to riff. I feel like I'm like, make it a rap. No, on the word transformed.
I'm in Detroit.
You're in Detroit.
I could rap.
You could rap. The word transformed has a lot of meaning to you. It's highlighted in your it's the name of your company, Fundraising Transformed. Why do you believe that the incremental doesn't work? We have to talk about transformed.
Yeah. For me, there is a clear distinction between change and transformation, right? I mean, my logo incorporates the butterfly, because once a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, there's no going back. I can, exercise and really pay attention to my health and lose 15 pounds and get my whatever under control, but it can regress. Mm. And the work that we do deserves beyond just change, especially with those. I work exclusively in the nonprofit space. And so change doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
It's a change is part of the journey, but what we need is true transformation, right? Next level, so that there are cures found, so that, kids have clean drinking water, so that the racial and social justice issues, not get a little better, but can we aim for solving these? Mm-hmm. And maybe someone will say, Tammy, that is just impossible because there is inherent evil. Okay, well, let's go for it. Mm-hmm. Right? If we truly want to inspire, if we truly want to make a difference with this, one wild and precious life that we have, I think we have to aim for no less than transformation.
No less than transformation. I'm taking that one to heart. That feels like, I always say it's tattoo worthy, and the other thing that you're also highlighting for everyone that's listening is you give what you get. When you expect transformation, when you put transformation on the table, it makes it at least possible. When you're hedging your bets and, go back to that scarcity mindset, right, of humble pie and piecing it together piecemeal, it's not going to happen. And to hold on to those dreams, to hold on to that vision of how the world can be better and what your role in it is, Tammy, that's what I'm taking away from that description.
Yeah.
How can people get in touch with you? How can people be transformed by being in your world?
Oh, thank you. Well, I have a newsletter. Okay. We also, we have a podcast, the Intentional Fundraiser podcast, which you can find on, any of wherever you consume your favorite podcasts, like this amazing podcast. You can go to fundraisingtransformed.com to find all kinds of free resources.
Fantastic.
Including, we have a membership community called Fundraising Transformers. There are multiple levels. The first level is free. Wow. And then the second level is growth, which is, again, a monthly subscription model. So check those things out. We've had some really transformational results. So if you go to the website or follow me on social at Tammy Zonker, you'll see some testimonials from some of our members of the Fundraising Transformer community. And they are nothing short of an inspiration.
Yeah.
Our belief is that if you can transform your fundraising, you will transform the world.
Right. Right. What a great conversation. I pinch myself whenever I get to host these conversations because I'm like, I really get to do this for a living, get a chance to talk to these people. So we will add all that stuff, Tammy, in the show notes. We will put links in so you guys can connect with Tammy. If the lost art of conversation and of listening appeals to you, there's a couple of things. I have a Meaningful Conversations toolkit that is available to you as well. Please email me, jenny@chavender.com. I can give you a code to provide that for free. But I'm like you, Tammy. I feel like if they take one thing away from today, it's not missing an opportunity for listening and for meaningful connection with others that happens when you are seen, heard, and valued. How's that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you for having me. What a really juicy conversation.
It's my pleasure. And to all of you listening, we'll see you next time on the Underdog Leadership Podcast. Ciao.